Finally, this evening, the South African rand edged lower on Wednesday, slipping to 0.5% to 18.28 against the dollar as investors locked in profits after 4 days of gains. Market sentiment remains cautious ahead of the US Federal Reserve's expected rate pause amid concerns over a slowdown tied to President Trump's trade tariffs. On the equities front, the JSE Top 40 dropped 0.65%, while the All-Share Index also fell, with slight gains of 0.05% in resource stocks. Market analyst Mshima Gama shares more on today's market performance.
So all eyes and ears are going to be on what the Fed announces on interest rate decision in the US this evening. This interest rate thing has been quite controversial, and the US has been rubbing many economies the wrong way. The trade wars have affected consumer sentiment, and I've mentioned before that a healthy economy is driven by consumerism, and if that slacks, then economy starts to suffer. Now, if the Fed hikes interest rates, this may just put a nail in a coffin to the US economy, which is already slowing down. But on the other hand, the US is suffering with high inflation. And this is after having no inflation for 44 years. Now, in order to curb that inflation, the Fed would have to hike interest rates. So it really puts the Fed in a tight spot. Speculation is that the Fed will leave rates unchanged in order to encourage continuous spending, because by hiking interest rates, it will also negatively impact people's purchasing power. But also, inflation is not good for currencies, which is the reason why we're seeing the dollar weaken or depreciate and our rand strengthen. Now, regarding the infamous trade wars, Chinese and US officials are apparently meeting this weekend to reach some kind of agreement. That's instilled a bit of hope in the market. We've seen some upside. What they're going to agree and what the meeting is going to, how it's going to end up, only God knows. But we have two bulls in the corral right now. And China has made it really clear that they're not begging and they're not going to back down to any threats. On our front, in our JSE market, we're seeing it test all-time highs, and I mentioned last week that that's good for our for pension funds. And our rand is basking in the sun of strength. We saw it test a high at 18.14 today. But I do believe we might see a bit of weakness over the next few days, just a natural reversion in the trend, but the trend remains pretty much bullish. So yeah, let's see what the Fed says when they announce their rate decision tonight. If it's unchanged, then the markets will be pretty much normal. But if they hike interest rates, that may just cause some panic or chaos in the market.